We have been going over supply and demand. I told you last time that supply and demand to me is the most important aspect of economics. I want you to guys read this class, read this course. Nothing else you learn is how to draw a supply and demand curve, supply and demand graph, and how to figure out what to do with it. So we're going to spend today just practicing more supply and demand. Today's going to be all about supply and demand. So supply and demand. What is supply? We've been over this for a couple of weeks now. What is supply? What is supply? Supply. What is demand? Yes.
Demand is like you want a certain supply, so you're like want for
Anyone else have an idea for what is demand? Yes.
Demand is the amount people are going to be wanting to purchase at a given price.
Demand is the quantity you want to purchase at a given price. It's the relationship between the quantity you want to purchase and prices. What is that relationship? Is it positive or negative? It's negative. Demand is the negative relationship between prices and quantities. Demand is a function. Demand is a function that says that you have a negative relationship. There's a negative relationship between prices and quantities. That as the price of something goes up, you will demand fewer quantities. If the price of something comes down, you will demand more quantities. Now what about supply? What is supply? Yes. The amount that's offered to the public for sale at a given price. Now what is the relationship between prices and quantity supply? Positive. As the price of something goes up, the supply of that thing goes up. Demand is the inverse relationship between price and quantity. Supply is the positive relationship between price and quantity. What's so special about where the demand curve and the supply curve intersect? Yes? What's special about it? So that's the equilibrium. What's equilibrating? The quantity demanded is the quantity supplied. What would that look like in the real world when the quantity demanded is precisely equal to the quantity supplied? What would that look like, potentially? Yeah?
The grocery store shelves be empty by the end of the day.
They would be empty by the end of the day. You would walk out of the grocery store with if you were the last person in the grocery store, your shopping cart would contain everything that grocery store had to sell for that day, and that was it. They would be cleaned out, no one else would be interested in buying anything, and there'd be nothing else available for sale. That was what pure market long-run equilibrium would look like. Most of the time we don't get this equilibrium. Most of the time we're hovering just above or below it. There's going to be either some shortages or some surpluses because prices weren't exactly right. Nobody knows what the equilibrium price is. We're trying to discover it. You offer a price, I sell at a price, or try to sell at a price, and then we hope that we can find the equilibrium. We don't always. What would it look like if the prices were too low? If prices are too low, what would happen to the quantity supplied and quantity demanded? If prices are too low. Anyone else? Anyone who hasn't put their hand up yet? Yes?
The quantity supplied would probably be less than the quantity demanded.
That's right. If prices are too low, the quantity supplied will be less than the quantity demanded. If prices are too low, the quantity supplied will be less than the quantity demanded. We call this a shortage. What if prices are too high? Prices are too high, yes? Yes, the quantity supplied will be more than the quantity demanded. We call that a surplus. Who wants to come draw a shortage on my graph right here? So I just expressed to you in words what a shortage is. Who can draw it on my graph there? Any volunteers? Any volunteers at all? So we've got prices, quantities, this is demand, this is supply. A shortage, we said that quantity, prices are too low, so quantity demanded, we call this QD, is going to be greater than quantity supplied. Call this a shortage. If we have a shortage, are prices just going to stay there forever? Prices are too low. Are we just going to be stuck with the shortage forever? Yes?
Suppliers would probably raise their prices.
Suppliers would raise their prices. Suppliers would raise their prices because they know there's a shortage. People are lining up to get this stuff, so they'll raise their prices to get closer to the equilibrium. What about when prices are too high? This is now quantity supplied. This is now quantity demanded. Here during shortage we had QD greater than QS. Here we have QS greater than QP. Call this a, what's this called? Surplus. If we're stuck at a surplus, what's going to happen? What are producers going to do if there's a surplus? They'll lower the prices. They'll lower the prices. They've got all this extra crap that they can't sell. They'll lower the prices. Let me just reiterate that supply is not the same thing as quantity supplied, and demand is not the same thing as quantity demanded. Demand is the curve. Quantity demanded is somewhere along the curve. Supply is the curve. Quantity supplied is somewhere along that curve. If there is a shortage, what's going to happen to supply? Is it going to increase, decrease, or stay the same? There's a shortage, what is going to happen to supply? Hands up. Who says increase? Who says decrease? Who says stay the same? Why would it stay the same?
Just not changing the actual supply, you're just changing the quantity you're supplying, but the just remains the same.
Exactly. If the prices are too low, the supply curve doesn't change. They will change the quantity that they supply and change the price that they offer that quantity. But the curve itself stays the same. Yes? Yes?
If it happens over a long period of time, people may change. If the shortage is lasting for a while and they see the trend continuing, they lower the amount of products they can use.
So let's remember that the supply curve is how much they're willing, how many quantities they're willing to supply at a given price. It's at a given price. So if the price is $10, they'll be willing to supply 10 units. If it's $5, they'll supply 5 units, etc. For the supply curve to change, that means that at a given price, they'll be offering more or less units. If the supply curve shifts out, that means they'll be offering 12 units at $10 instead of 10. If the supply curve shifts in, they'll be offering 8 units instead of 10 for $10. So if there is a shortage, they'll just increase the quantity that they sell at a higher price. They can still sell at that lower price the same amount of quantities, but they can just go along the same supply curve. They don't have to change. So the reason the supply curve shifts is because of their changes in technology. They don't need to change their technology to shift to raise the prices. They can just raise prices. Raising prices is cheaper than changing your technology. Let's do some more applications. You got demand, you got supply, prices, quantities. Let's talk about the minimum wage. Okay? We mentioned the minimum wage last time. Let's just refresh our mind. The minimum wage sets a minimum price that you can hire people. The minimum wage is the minimum price that you can pay people to work for you. Would the minimum wage be required if they set it at $0? They set it way below the equilibrium. Let's say we live in a world right now where the equilibrium wage is $5 an hour, and so many people will be hired. If the government comes in and sets the minimum wage at $1 an hour, would there be any effect? What would be the effect? Yes?
People that get paid under $1, the employer would have to lay people off to get those costs.
So I'm already establishing that there's the equilibrium wage is $5 an hour. Yes?
Well, wouldn't that still happen if we establish that just because there's an equilibrium point, it doesn't mean that the rest of them at that point?
So I'm assuming that we already are at the $5 an hour equilibrium world. And now the government comes in and says minimum wage is going to be $1 an hour. Yes?
Are you assuming that everyone gets paid $5 an hour?
Not everyone in the world, but this is going to be for the relevant market. The lowest wage people are at $5. So we can segment up the labor economy by skill, etc. And then whatever way you segment it, there's going to be the lowest paid segment. The lowest paid segment is $5 an hour. And at $5 an hour is the lowest paid segment. The government comes in and says, we're going to offer, the minimum wage now is of $1 per hour. What's going to happen to the quantity supplied? Yes? Why would it shift? So the government comes in and says, so this is the equilibrium price. The government comes in and says, you can't pay lower than $1 an hour. Yes?
Are we assuming that this is the first time government has introduced it?
Yes. Yes. Quiet, please. Say again, sorry? Why would there be a surplus? So they're already getting paid $5 an hour, and the government comes in and says you can't pay them lower than $5 an hour. The lowest person is already making $5 an hour.
It's going from $5 to $1, so then when more companies want to hire more people, they're paying lower wages.
Yes?
Since it's not like a mandatory wage, and it's just the minimum cash, there will be no change in quantity supplied.
That's right. Because the established, the prevailing wage is already above the minimum, a minimum wage below the prevailing wage will have zero effect. If your price floor is below the equilibrium wage, the equilibrium price, it will have zero effect. So in order to change anything, you need a price floor above the equilibrium. So now the government wises up and says, let's have a minimum wage of $10 per hour. Yes?
But why wouldn't, companies lower that $5 an hour to $1 an hour if they can?
Well, imagine if there was no minimum wage, why wouldn't they pay lower than $5 an hour to begin with?
Sorry, like, why wouldn't they?
Yeah, so there's already a $5 an hour wage. There's no minimum wage. And we're already gotten at $5 an hour. Why wouldn't it get lower? Yes?
Because they can't hire people if they pay them less.
That's right. People would choose to be unemployed than work for less than $5 an hour in this example. Yes?
Wouldn't like the government introducing like a minimum wage kind of cause like a belief shift or cultural shift of be like, oh, so this is what people will work for and then would think that's fair to work for if the government said it.
Maybe you could say that people are using government prices as like a heuristic. You could make that argument. For this example, we're going to ignore that. We're going to say people just see the government price and then because the minimum wage is below the equilibrium wage, they're going to ignore it. It means nothing. Is that clear? Any other questions? Yes?
Why not just not have a minimum wage
and then for skilled labor, the companies would have to pay more for the skilled labor. And eventually, people will catch on to that and want to have more money for the skilled labor.
So why governments have minimum wages? Complicated history. In the previous lecture, I hinted at some of the racist origins of that, but it's complicated. Let's just say that they want a minimum wage. They set it at $1, which is below the equilibrium wage, and nothing happens. Now they set it at above the equilibrium wage. What's going to happen? Anyone else? Yes.
The quantity supplied to the amount of people wanting to be hired would be greater than the number of positions available for quantity demanded.
That's right. Quantity supplied, quantity demanded. What do you call it when the quantity supply of workers is more than the quantity supply of jobs? It's a surplus. We have a special name for this kind of surplus. That's called unemployment. Unemployment doesn't just mean that you're not working. In economics, unemployment means that you want a job, but you haven't been hired. You are actively looking for a job, but you do not currently have a job. Retired people, under economics definitions, are not unemployed. They're retired. Unemployed is you're sitting at home, you're applying for work, you're sending out resumes, you want a job, but you can't find one. That's unemployment. This is unemployment. All this unemployment. Let's now talk about rent control. Demand, supply. So the prevailing rents, let's say in wealth, are at, let's say, $500 per month. If the prevailing rent is $500 per month, and the government says, okay, you can't charge more than $1,000 per month. The prevailing rent is $500 per month. The government says you can't charge more than $1,000 per month. What's going to happen to the quantity supplied and quantity demanded? Yes?
And nothing will change because they're already charging less than the $1,000 a month limit.
Yeah. Nothing will change because they're already charging less than $1,000 per month. Now what if the government comes in and says you can only charge $300 per month? What's going to happen? Yeah. The quantity supplied will be over here. Quantity demanded over here. There'll be a shortage. What do we call when there's a shortage of housing?
I just have a question for
Yeah.
what, like, quantity supply and quantity demanded. Like, in the last example, it was quantity workers was quantity supplied, right? And
Yes.
then quantity demanded was like
Employers, yeah.
how many, like, what if you just, like, what if I flip that on mine and say quantity supplied of jobs, quantity demanded for workers, right?
So you're asking if are workers demanding jobs and then suppliers are supplying jobs?
Yeah.
Well, it's remember, supply is the relationship between price and quantity, right? Would employers, would they offer more jobs at a higher price or fewer jobs at a higher price? Fewer. So they have the inverse relationship, so they're the demanders.
Okay.
back to housing. If there's more people looking to buy or looking to rent than there are homes available for rent, what's going to happen to the extra people? They're going to be homeless. Any other questions? Clarifications? Yes?
For the first one, when you said that you raised it to $10 an hour, how exactly, can you explain that very quickly again, how that shifted?
How
How it shifted?
it shifted? Nothing shifted.
Well, like what happened?
So the government just says it's now illegal to hire anyone for less than $10 an hour.
Yeah,
That's going to be the price.
yeah.
That's the minimum price. And when it's the minimum price, demand and supply don't shift right away at least. And when they're not shifting, you're going to end up with a surplus situation. So there's no shift in supply and demand in the curves. It's just there's now an excess between quantity supplied and quantity demanded. Let's talk about shifts now. So big news recently has been about the blockades on the CN rail. So we've got our demand and supply. Yes?
Just for the previous example.
Sure. Sorry. Quiet, please.
So when you said if government says you can, or it goes to $300 when it can't go more. What was the example? If you can't charge more than $300 a month, but people are charging $500 a month, doesn't that mean that there's just a shortage in affordable housing?
Well, this was the $500 was the lowest price housing available.
Right.
And then now we're saying you can't charge more than 300. So you're right, if any housing was selling for above 500, then that's not going to be affected. Right away anyway. So now let's talk about the blockades. We had some blockades of the rail lines, the railways. That means fewer goods can travel by rail, right? So let's just assume the only thing traveling by rail is oil. So this is the supply of oil. Did the prices change for oil during that time when they started the blockades? Not initially. But at the same price, because the trains can't get through. Are trains the only way we get oil? No. So we know that the supply of oil is provided by trains, by boats, and by trucks, vehicles. Now the blockades on the trains took that away. What's going to happen to the supply curve? What's going to happen to the supply curve? Yes?
Less quantity will be supplied for the same price.
Initially, less quantity will be supplied at the same price. If this was the original price and quantity, first there will be less quantity at the same price, but then we'll shift quickly to a higher price. Yes?
The curve shifting because you affect technology, as you were saying?
Yeah, it's a kind of technology. Transporting oil by train is a kind of technology.
last ones they didn't shift because.
No, there was no change in technology, just changing the price. Any other questions? One more exam. So, what are we going to call this green consciousness? So let's call this the market for fossil fuel consumption. All fossil fuel consumptions. Okay? Now, over the last 40 or so years, scientists have been telling us that we've been burning too many fossil fuels, there are greenhouse gases, the climate is getting out of whack, we need to cut back on fossil fuel consumption. Who are they trying to influence when they say this stuff? Are they trying to influence suppliers, or are they trying to influence consumers? Trying to influence consumers. They're trying to say, stop buying things that use fossil fuels. If you're buying fewer fossil fuels, what's going to happen? Is the demand curve going to shift in or out? You're buying fewer fossil fuels at the same price. It's going to shift in. This was the original quantity and price. And now, you've got a new quantity and price. Quantity went in, price went down. Yes?
In this model, would you take into account the fact that we're also running out of fossil fuels?
So we'll talk about running out of fossil fuels later in the course. But in this one, we don't need to assume that. Any other questions? Okay. In your quiz this week, it's going to be a lot about supply and demand. I urge you to draw the supply and demand whenever they ask you to. I personally draw maybe 10 or 20 supply and demand graphs in my day-to-day life. Whenever I'm just thinking of anything in the news, I think about what's going to happen. I draw the supply and demand graph originally, and then I try to figure out what's changing. Supply is going up, supply is going down, demand is going up, demand is going down. Let's talk about tuition. We'll end the class with tuition. So there's some equilibrium price and quantity for tuition and university attendance. The government of Ontario offers a program called OSAP. If they increase OSAP, how's the supply and demand graph going to change? By increasing OSAP, how's the supply and demand graph going to change? Well, what is OSAP? OSAP is a loan to you in order for you to be able to pay the tuition, right? The government is now giving you more money than you would have otherwise had. What's going to change? Demand or supply? Who says supply? Who says demand? demand. You can now pay for more university than you otherwise would have. Is demand going to go up or down? It's going to go up. So what's going to happen to tuition prices? If this was the original quantity and the original price, what's going to happen to tuition prices? They're going to go up. Quantity is going to go up. Prices are going to go up. About 10 years ago, the government of Ontario just started offering a grant of several, I think it was $1,000 or $2,000, just a grant for everyone who's going to university. Prices for tuitions have gone up about $1,000. Should we be surprised by this? According to this, not really. Questions?